Okay.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. I would like to welcome you to the Appropriations Subcommittee Higher Education meeting today. It is March 4th, and this is our fourth, they're running together. I think it's a fourth agency hearing, and probably one of the most important for so many people out there. Before I get started, I want to ask Representative Haddad if he would like to say anything.
I won't take up much time. I appreciate the opportunity as always to hear from our agencies involved in post-secondary education. Look forward to the presentations today, and even more so to the panels and the public input this evening, which is to my mind always a highlight of my year to listen, especially to students talk about the importance of higher education in their lives. And so that'll be later. But first we hear from our agencies, and I look forward to hearing what they have to say.
Thank you, sir. And I too agree with you. The highlight is listening to the students, both when we do the higher ed and when we do the elementary ed, listening to the people that are the recipients of what we do. Sometimes it makes us really get chills because of how hard we work at trying to balance it. And then we get to see it, we get to see it all the time. So thank you, sir. My other chairs are probably in between a lot of meetings, and we've already had some late night, all day marathons. So I do not hesitate to say thank you guys for what you're doing. And when they jump on, they'll jump on. So starting, I want to also remind everybody, please, if you're not speaking, to mute your microphone. And if you hear any noise in the background, more than I need, but there's some construction going on. And so I apologize, and I'll try to keep my microphone muted as much as possible. So with that, I am going to welcome Tim Larson. Good morning, sir. And what we ask everybody to do is to introduce your team, because this may be the one and only time we get to see any of your team. And I mean, we all love being able to put a name and a face together. So when we pick up the phone, we get to know who we're talking to, and it makes it a little bit more personal. So it's great to see you, sir. How you doing?
Absolutely. It's great to see you as well, Representative, and thank you for the opportunity for our office to sort of share with you our budget, our highlights. It's quite interesting. I was on a full agency meeting yesterday with the governor's office, and yesterday was a year to the day that we started combating this horrendous COVID virus, but clearly with vaccines coming, I think the governor's office and all involved have done a masterful job in keeping our residents safe and doing some great things. And again, light at the end of the tunnel. It's my understanding that we have submitted testimony and that we should be prepared to just answer questions. I've schooled all of my division directors and my legislative aide that brevity is of the highest importance, and that so I have online, I have Jackie Lucier, who handles our student services, Ram Abastaria, who does our finance piece inside our office, and Sean Seepersad, who is our licensing and accrediting, as well as Noel Kidney, who is our legislative liaison. So with that, I can walk you through some highlights, or just sort of sit back and answer questions to your desire, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, sir. And I'm going to ask you to just sort of, for a lot of the new legislators that are here, they don't quite understand the Office of Higher Ed versus CSCU system versus UConn. And it's important for them to understand that there are more than just the CSCU system that's managed through the state. So if you can give us a brief overview of that, that would be great as a beginning, and then we can try and dig a little deeper into it.
Very quickly, as we've outlined in our testimony, so in the universe system in the state of Connecticut, obviously the University of Connecticut stands alone and is governed, et cetera, and funded. Then you have the university system, which is our four the state universities, and the community colleges. And then the Office of Higher Ed, which we're talking about this morning, basically does the licensing and accrediting of all of the independent colleges. So you would think from Yale University down to Goodwin University, if you will. We also have a couple of subsets of that where we do state reciprocity agreements for online education opportunities, other components of other offices of higher, other institutions that want to sell services or educate folks in the state of Connecticut. So we handle that independent college vein for the licensing and accrediting. We also do the POSAs, which is the 2-year certificate schools, which would be the Porter and Chester, the beauticians, the cosmetology folks, down to New England tractor training, which frankly, during the pandemic, we're starting to see an awful lot of tilt towards these 2-year occupational schools, if you will. At the end of this month, we will have our first virtual career school fair online. And we've pushed this out to every high school, all of the adult learners, so you'll be able to click in and we'll provide you with all of that information so that you can click in and enjoy that as well as the university system opportunities, right? We have a veterans component. We're the state approving agency for veterans. So if you're a veteran in the state of Connecticut and you're taking college classes, we make sure that those classes you're taking in line with what the Veterans Administration will pay for, as well as housing and other ancillary veteran type services. We're also largely in charge of the Roberta Willis Scholarship, which you're aware of is the state's largest scholarship program for in-state Connecticut kids going to in-state colleges in Connecticut, and a handful of other smaller scholarship programs that we facilitate on their behalf. We also run a national services program, which you may be familiar with as AmeriCorps, where inside that national services division, there are essentially 6 or 7 different nonprofits that we help support through our back office supply. We help those nonprofits navigate through each and every one of those. And then we also run the alternative route to certification, which is a Saturday afternoon program where after you've secured your bachelor's degree and you wish to become certified in the state of Connecticut, you contact our office. We have approximately 120 students going through that program on an annual basis. We try to do a significant rollout and outreach to minority students and veterans, if you will, to try to handle those needs inside of that. So that sort of gives you a sort of an overview of our agency. We're more so much of a compliance agency for these institutions. Student support and student needs is our primary focus, right? We want to make sure that when kids are going to these schools, that they're getting treated fairly, the classes that they're taking are appropriate and grounded and authorized and accredited, et cetera. So we're constantly on top of the independent colleges, these POSA schools, and all of these other opportunities for people in Connecticut to get a certificate program. You might be on mute. I think you were muted.
Yes, I was, and I apologize. It's been a long week. Thank you for that, and I think that gives a lot of our new legislators a better background to understand, because I know at some point either I'd get a call or Senator Austin would get a call, and they say, "What does higher ed really do?" So that helps us in cutting down on the number of calls that we get. But I also want to, I apologize. I did not see Representative Hall, who's our ranking member on higher ed, on the screen. I hope she didn't leave. And I just wanted to give her a chance to say good morning. I apologize, ma'am. I did not see you.
No, no worries. I really just want to wish everybody a great day. It's been a lot of Zoom meetings for everybody. I think we're all zoomed out, but this is one of my favorites too, Madam Chair, and it's an exciting day, and love hearing from the students. So looking forward to that tonight, but thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, with that, I would also ask if any of my members have questions to please raise their hand in the chat box. And I'm going to go first to Representative Haddad.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you very much to the Director Larson and to the rest of your staff. We appreciate your presence here. I had a couple questions. One was just about the Roberta Willis Scholarship. At one point, the scholarship was providing grants just to sophomores, juniors, and seniors. I'm wondering if you can tell me what the current status is of the grants and how many we're giving out, what the average size of the grants are, and if you could just explain briefly for the rest of the committee members the difference between the need merit portion of the scholarship program and the need only portion of the scholarship program.
So to the level that we have, because of the flat funding of this grant over, I will say, the last 4 or 5 years, it does not allow us to entertain a grant to freshmen, which continues to be a problem. We can provide you with exact data on every school receiving both need and merit-based dollars. So effectively, we take an application in from a school. We have a process internally based on the threshold of money that we receive. We allocate monies to both the students and to the schools that they're participating in. So no student gets a check, but that the scholarship money goes directly to the college. So we're continually back and forth with that as it relates to the college. We can provide data to each and every one of you. We may have included it in our testimony, but we'll give you a breakdown of every school, how many students are being awarded at every school and at what level, be it need or merit.
Yeah. So let me express a little bit of frustration, not at you, but at the situation. The need merit portion in particular is a scholarship program that's designed to help retain our best and brightest students in Connecticut schools, right? So it's an incentive for our best students who also have need to stay in Connecticut by getting a need merit Roberta Willis scholarship program. A scholarship and staying, which they can bring to any Connecticut institution. The fact that we don't provide that scholarship to freshmen when they're making a decision about where they're going to school, I think points out the need for some change here. I had hoped for a number of years in a row that we might be able to figure out a way to sort of resolve this. But so let me ask you this question. Does the scholarship program itself dictate the size of the scholarship?
Yes.
And is that set in statute, the size of the scholarship?
Yes.
Okay. So we either need to revise the statute to allow for a smaller grant that will cover 4 years, or we need to provide additional funding. Can you provide us the dollar amount necessary to provide the 4th year grant, which is actually the 1st year grant in the need merit portion of the scholarship program? Would that be something that you could calculate and provide to us?
Absolutely. I think we've done this in the past. And to your point, there's 2 ways to cure this. One is to reduce the amount of the grant so we can incorporate more folks, or increase the amount of the Roberta Willis Scholarship Program. So we effectively get, I'll say, $33 million. And just for discussion's sake, effectively UConn will get 11 million, the state university system and community colleges will get 11 million, and then the independent colleges will get 11 million. So it sort of breaks out in that fashion, and we can provide you. Now that may not be the exact, but we're trying to capture as much of the student need as we can in the state in a fair and equitable way. We can provide all of that to you. Probably the end of the day, if not tomorrow, we can put that equation out.
That's great. My next question on a different, I don't want to take up much time, so I'm just going to be really quick, but that would be very helpful because I think that we need to make that adjustment somewhere, because having a program that incentivizes students to stay in Connecticut a year after they've decided where they're going to go to college just doesn't work for anybody. The governor's bill on workforce development, I noticed, eliminates the requirement that our public universities report any changes that they make to their programs to the Office of Higher Education. I think there might be a similar provision for private universities as well. Can you, is that related to the creation of the credential registry? I'm wondering if I mean, a big part of what you've done, what your responsibilities are, is to monitor the quality of programs, and particularly when they shut down, to make sure that institutions are doing right by students by making sure they have teach-out programs. One of the ways that you've been able to do that is because you have the information on file that describes all of the programs. I'm just trying to figure out in that bill, if we eliminate the responsibility for institutions to provide information to you, if that undercuts your ability to provide that consumer protection or not.
That's a great question. What I want to do is just pivot my screen to Sean Seepersat. He's the director in that division, has been working with the Office of Workforce Strategies on this particular bill. Prior to that, I mean, basically, this is an all-in strategy to try to get as much credential information into one cavity, so that when a student or a business or opportunities come up, there's a way to get into it. It's a way to sort of de-silo each of our own agencies and forecast and put information out into a registry that people can identify with. Let me just slide my screen over, and this is Sean Seepersat.
Hello, Representative.
Hi, how are you? I was looking for your name on the board, and I was getting ready to say he's not on, but go ahead.
We need more money in our agency for more computers.
So yes, so just to build on Tim's point here, what the credential registry does is essentially build on the inventory that we already do and expands on it. So it's kind of taking those functions that were in statute in the other places and consolidating it under this credential registry. So if that bill passes, essentially not only will we be collecting information from publics and privates and the post-secondary occupational schools, but then we will also start collecting information on apprenticeships and the ETPL out of the Department of Labor as well too. So we'll have a larger pool of information, and we'll also be collecting more information about each of the programs as well. So that those things were taken out was just to reduce redundancy in the statutes. And then one other quick thing, when you talked about school closings, our office had put out some legislation which basically asks independent colleges and universities, if they are closing, to provide us information about teach outs and so on. So we tried to have some legislation in there that would be a bit more deliberate about addressing school closings and teach outs.
Thank you. And so the reporting function will be for the specific purpose of helping to create the credential registry, which, by the way, I agree is like a terrific idea and program, to have a one place that people can go to learn about all post-secondary programs, and the cost, and the potential for being employed once you earn those credentials, I think is a great use of your time. There's no additional funding in your budget. The career registry is a substantial new project. I wanted to check to make sure that you think that you can accomplish that goal with partners without any additional funding.
Yes, yes, we can.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Those are my
Thank
questions.
you. Thank you. Remember, if you have any questions, please raise your hand. See, Representative, did Representative Hall, did you raise your hand? I'm sorry. No. Okay. No. Okay. Then we go to Senator Anwar.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Director Larson. Good to see you and good to see your team members. Thank you for all the good work you and your team have been doing. Of all the different responsibilities that your agency has, your group has, one of the ones that I want to highlight and seek your insight is to operate the alternative route to certification program for college educated professionals interested in becoming teachers. And that is essentially one of the lifelines in some of our underserved communities or minority communities. And there's a lot of conversation that is happening. How do we get more minority teachers into the minority communities? And I see that the budget has been flat. And in our previous efforts, we have done good, but we could be doing better. And I almost felt that this was an area where we could have put more resources to empower your office to achieve what has shown to truly change the lives of our children. So I wanted you to see what thoughts are, and we do something to focus on that area?
I want to make sure. Okay. Yes, we can. And that's a great question. And thank you for asking that. And first, Dr. Anwar, I have not had an opportunity to reach out to you with your family situation, and I'm deeply sorrowful for that. I'm sure that it's troubling for you, and just my deepest sympathy to you and your family. The art program that we run in our office, again, is an opportunity for those individuals who have a bachelor's degree to come into our office, apply for what is a Friday, Saturday program that lasts about 8 months. It costs about $5,000. I'm giving you the outline. We have about 120 or so students enrolled, and that seems to be sort of the 4-year rolling average. We would like to be able to increase some of that. Some of the techniques we have tried to use to reach out to minority candidates is both essentially through the military. And so we are actually reaching out to military for people who are in Connecticut. 45 to 55% of the military are minority individuals. So we felt this might be an easier way to capture those individuals. So none of those military folks, but their spouses are eligible for our program. And we are taking a look at a number of different opportunities. We're starting to take applications now for the September semester. We've got about 25 in, but we're looking at, on a very broad level, going to the various colleges, and we're looking at folks that typically wouldn't take a teaching curriculum because they're either involved in athletics, drama, the arts, so they don't have the ability to get to the student teaching piece of it, of which is a piece of our program, right? We need them, there's a segment inside our art program which allows them to get into the classroom and use their skills. So we feel like we can reach out to those individuals in those classifications at colleges and try to market in that regard. So we are cognizant of it. It is a very, very big issue across the state. And within our budget, we are trying to use what we can to accommodate and attract those types of individuals.
Thank you so much, Director Larson. Thank you for your kind words. And this is more not for the agency, but for us, the legislators, that this probably is an area of opportunity. If we were to see there's a way to appropriate more resources to empower this entire Office of Higher Education to do what we all know is needed. I would have expected the budget to actually have more. This is a value that everybody talks about, but we have not invested in this value, and I probably an area that we can probably invest more in this value. So at least as one legislator, I think this is worthy to look at because
the Connecticut Press Corps, and I think most people who read.
And
I'm
that
sorry.
the investment
If you have-
itself would help us achieve some of our. Thank you again. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Senator Anwar,
Yeah.
we also do have a specific program. It's called the Minority Teacher Incentive Program,
Right.
which is available to Connecticut students looking to put a career in and get a teaching certificate. It's about a $20,000 award that you get your junior and senior. You get $2,500 your junior year, $2,500 your senior year, $2,500 when you graduate, and then an additional $2,500 when you land a job in Connecticut. So that will help defer your costs, specifically targeted for minority teachers to incentivize them to get involved in that profession.
Thank you, sir, and thank you, Senator Anwar, and thank you, Mr. Larson, for that response. We're getting close to the end, so I just have my quick questions. I didn't get a chance very quickly. Did you get any CARES relief fund this past year? Did you get
Directly into the agency? No, but we help facilitate gear funding where we use basically the same Roberta Willis formula to push out money to those colleges along the Roberta Willis platform to inject some more funds for student awards.
Okay.
Nothing directly to our agency.
Nothing directly to your agency. Okay. And my final one is: do you have? I see you have 27 employees that are in your office currently.
Yes.
Are those all filled positions? You can get back to me. Just I'd like that. I'd like to know about your
Our head count is 27. We have 24 bodies here. We have 2 retirements, which we would look to fill. So within our appropriation, we're not looking to expand, any of that other than, repurpose the 2 folks that are going to be retiring.
All right, we will. If you can bring some information, some of the information. I saw your organizational chart. I'll look at it and come up with some other questions that I have on your organizational chart. We have 2 people whose hands are up, and we only have a few minutes. So if you could just get directly to your questions and have Mr. Larson send the answers to the working group. Representative Datham.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Larson, for coming today. If you could please bring to the working group the explanation around the Open Educational Resource Coordinating Council that was established. Could you explain at the working group any money that you've used for that and why you want to eliminate it? Because this was something that the legislature passed. So if you could please bring that to the working group, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Briefly.
No, briefly. We got to go. Representative Turco.
Make it very easy for you, Madam Chair. Representative Dayton just asked the same question I was going to, so I'm all set. I look forward to the response in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'm sorry, Mr. Larson, go right ahead if you can do this briefly.
No, I was going to say we can provide that information. The Open Educational Resource Program has been very, very successful. I think, frankly, the dollars going forward were a cost-saving measure. The committee has not been disbanded, and they do actually have opportunities to raise their own private funds, if you will. Again, they've done a fantastic job with the money that they have been provided. We can give you the exact dollar amounts. Our office basically facilitates and helps that group out and make sure that they can do the transactions and that type of a thing. But a very dynamic group doing a great job. And again, I think that the lack of funding was a cost-saving measure on the grand total of the budget.
Okay.
But we can provide you with specific detail on that. They've done a great job with that.
And for the working group, could you bring to the working group what you do with the funding that you have in the the minority teacher line item, what do you utilize those dollars for? And the minority advancement program, I'd like to know what are you doing with those dollars? And if you could bring that to the working group, and any materials, you can send it to Sue Keen if you're following up with any responses, so that everybody on the subcommittee can get that information. So I thank you, sir. I thank you for your testimony, and I don't see any more questions, and it was good seeing you again. So have a good afternoon, and morning. Have a good morning. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Representative. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Madam Chair, Jane Gates and her team from the CSCU system are in.
Awesome. Okay. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, madam. How are you? Dr. Gates? There we go. Dr. Gates, it's a pleasure seeing you again. How are you?
I am doing well. Thank you. Thank you so much, Representative.
What we do during these hearings is what we ask you to do is introduce all your team so that we can all sort of put faces to the names that we see or talk to. And then we ask all legislators if they would do 2 questions at a round, and go through the different things that you have provided us, so that you're not just reading to us. We actually are getting to the heart of the questions that we feel are important for us to start to make some decisions for the budget. So with that, I'd like to give you a few minutes to introduce yourself and then your team, and then we'll go right into the questions. Go right ahead, ma'am.
Thank you. Good morning, Senator Austin, and again, Representative Walker, Senator Minor, Representative France, and the members of the Appropriations Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on the governor's proposed budget adjustments as they pertain to the Connecticut State Colleges and Universities, CSCU. I've had the pleasure to work with many of you in the past, but for those of you who don't know me, and for the record, my name is Dr. Jane Gates, and I am the interim president, as well as the provost and senior vice president for academic and student affairs for CSCU. Today, I am joined by a number of my colleagues to help answer questions. With me today are CSCU Chief Financial Officer Ben Barnes, CSCU Chief Operating Officer and the Chief of Staff, Dr. Alice Pritchard, Connecticut State Community College, that's another acronym, CSCC, Interim President, Dr. David Levinson, CSCC Interim Chief Financial Officer, Carrie Kelly, CSCU Vice President for Enrollment Management, Dr. Allison Buckley, and CSCU Senior Director of Government Relations and External Affairs, Sean Bradbury. So we know you all have a very long day ahead of you, so we're very happy to jump right into your questions and promise that anything we can't answer today, we will follow up in our work session on the 17th or in writing afterwards.
Thank you, Dr. Gates. And it was a pleasure meeting you at Gateway Community College, and I look forward to working with you. So I'm going to jump right in with my co-chair first, Senator Austin. Senator Austin, go right ahead.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I apologize for being a little late this morning, but ready for the rest of the day. So I have 2 questions, and they're 2 distinctly different questions. One is relative to the debt-free college component. And the governor has put $6 million in the budget. I want to know exactly what that does. Does that reach all full-time students? Does it reach any part-time students? What exactly does that $6 million do? And what do you need to roll it out to more students?
So
that's my first question.
Thank you. We'll direct that response to Dr. Buckley, Allison Buckley.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. The legislation for the Pact Program for debt-free college limited eligibility to full-time students who are enrolled in 12 credits or more. So part-time students are not eligible for the Pact program. In the current academic year, we were able, with the $6 million, to fund approximately 3,000 students, but there were approximately 1,000 students who were eligible for the program, but funding was not available.
So, thank you very much for that. So the $6 million that the governor put in the next biennium budget for debt-free college, could you send a spreadsheet on what that would cover for students across the board? I don't need you to answer that now, but I'd be interested in what would the recommendation be to include more students, including part-time students. How many of those students were eligible for FAFSA, whatever, the whole ball wax on that particular issue.
So, and I probably should clarify that the 6 million would really support the students, or the students who are already enrolled. It wouldn't really provide any bandwidth to bring new students into Pact, but we can certainly provide that money. We had done preliminary estimates in our request and looking at the number of students for full-time and what it would take to grow as we continue to have new students come on board. And I believe that was around 16.8 million for fiscal 22 and 22.9 million afterwards. Now, certainly we've had enrollment setbacks, so we are in the process of looking at those numbers, and we'll have revised estimates at the end of March.
Thank you. I would just be interested in that whole
part-time,
that whole mechanism. How many federal dollars would we get? I just want to have a spreadsheet that incorporates all that information on one spreadsheet so that I can look at it and see what are our plans for the future on how we're going to deal with this. Can any federal dollars fill in here? These are questions that I have. My second question is relative to the unfunded liability. And in this biennium, the governor did not put, in the upcoming biennium, not the current one, but in the upcoming biennium, the dollars for the unfunded liability is limited or not at all in this upcoming biennium. Can you let me know what you need in unfunded liability dollars or not, and what impact does this have not having that? I believe it was $20 million.
Ben Barnes, can you respond, please?
Sure. I think I've been designated to answer questions about fringes. Yes, you're correct that the governor's budget did not continue the language that required an additional $20.5 million to be funded out of the comptroller's appropriation for fringe benefits. This year, with that additional 20 million, the state, between its normal general fund fringe benefit support and the supplemental operating fund fringe benefit support, is covering almost the entire cost of fringe benefits in the community college system. So only a few $1 million ends up being carried by tuition funds that we collect from our students. But obviously the cost of fringe benefits does grow faster than our tuition revenue and faster than our overall expenses. So we anticipate, even if the state were to continue funding its $20 million, that we would have to absorb more fringe benefits into our tuition funds next year. We can try to update our estimate of that, but it's really depends a lot on the number of we have a lot of uncertainty about enrollment, so it's hard to be sure what next year will look like. However, we know that we will have to absorb at least that about 25 million, or maybe that will grow next year in fringe benefits as a result of this legislative change. So we're very anxious to have that decision reversed and to have the continued operating fund fringe benefit support, which again has been an incredible blessing to our students, because it has insulated them effectively from having to support fringe benefits costs at the community college level.
Thank you very much, Ben. And I would just remind everybody that there is a difference between ongoing fringe benefit for current employees that were hired after the last agreement under the Malloy administration, who essentially are paying their whole pension. That really the problem is and still relates to the unfunded liability of 70 years of not paying our bills. So that's why we need to continue to incorporate into the budget the delta that is relevant to this, so that we can get over this hump. Taking far too long, granted, but we were left with this responsibility from the last 7 or more decades from prior administrations previous to the Malloy administration, who would not allow us to kick the can down the road. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you very much, Madam President and your staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Austin. Mr. Barnes, it's great seeing you again. You said community college. Did you mean just the community college? What about the CSCU system?
The CSCU system does not receive a supplemental fringe benefit support. So in the university system, the amount of fringes that are paid, the universities in total this year pay about $225 million worth of fringe benefits for our employees, and we receive fringe benefit support for our general fund employees of about $146 million. So there's roughly $80 million of fringe benefits for university employees that are funded by tuition payments by our students at the universities. We would obviously, we would obviously love to see additional operating fund fringe benefit support for the universities as well. The universities have been very hard hit by loss of revenue, not only from tuition, but because of the real bottom dropping out in student interest in living on campus this year during COVID. We're working very hard to get those students back, but it remains to be seen how quickly we'll be able to do that. So that if you were looking to find ways to support the universities in going forward, supplemental operating fund fringe benefit support would be a great way to do that.
Thank you, sir. Let's see. Senator Minor, do you have any questions? Good morning.
Good morning to you. So as I'm listening to the conversation, I'm wondering, across the spectrum of campuses, during the COVID situation, has there been any reduction, any furlough, any hour reduction of any staff, knowing that there probably has been a significant change in the number of students that have attended college via Zoom or in person?
Yes, there has been a significant reduction. As you know, higher education at both the college and university levels instruction is provided by a combination of full-time faculty who are our full-time employees, as well as adjunct faculty who are part-time employees. Some of them are full-time employees elsewhere. It's a complex, but we have a lot of part-time assignments for faculty to teach courses, and those are only offered to faculty to the extent that we have students filling those courses. So there's a whole process for developing those course schedules and attracting adjunct faculty to teach them. So at the university level, for instance, this year, our part-time salary costs, which is 99% adjunct faculty, has gone down by about 4% compared to the prior year since fiscal 20. So we are, we've cut that number by about $2.5 million at the universities. At the colleges, our part-time numbers are down a similar amount. So we're down, totals are a little different. We're down about between $2 and $3 million in part-time faculty at the colleges based on demand. As the enrollment drops, we hire fewer adjuncts because the courses aren't full. I will tell you that because of the startup of online operations, there are some contractual provisions that we face around the number of students in online courses, and there's some learning curve for our faculty. So we may not have been able to reduce the number of part-time faculty exactly in proportion to our loss of revenue in each case, because we've allowed courses to go forward that are enrolled at a lower level in order to continue to allow our existing students to finish their necessary coursework. And again, in reflection of the fact that we are appreciative of the challenges of converting in short notice to online education. But we have indeed saved quite a bit through those savings. There have also been a whole series of savings initiatives in both the colleges and universities that have been put in place to respond to the drop off in revenue. We lost significant amounts of revenue from tuition and fees and housing costs, and we have tightened our belts enormously. Some of that was relatively easy. For instance, cutting out of state travel in 2020 was an easy decision and one that saved us quite a bit of money. There are plenty of examples throughout our operations of ways in which we have reduced our spending in order to try to survive this very difficult year with as much of our powder dry as possible.
Thank you. Would it be possible to send that portion of the agreements that you talked about that limits the number of online students to the committee? I don't need it now, but it is good to see you. Hope you've been well. And
I have. And I will tell you that I'm not certain that that's in all of our contracts. I know that that's in at least one or two of our faculty contracts. I will get those provisions related to online instruction and provide this to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you, Madam.
Thank you. Representative Hall, followed by Representative Haddad.
Good morning, everybody. I think this question is for Mr. Barnes, but if somebody else needs to address it, that's fine. The question I have goes to the federal stimulus money that you folks received, and we understand that there's two buckets, one that came through the CARES Act and then the other from the actual stimulus money. So the notes I have say that it looks like you received about 50 million from the stimulus and then another 15 million from the CARES. Can you, and then there's some anticipated revenue, I think, that may come in the way of stimulus money coming up. So a couple of questions in regards to the breakdown of that 50 million. And how do you have plans on spending that? Is it already allocated to certain buckets? And if it's not, can those dollars be used to help supplement the debt-free college for more students? So kind of a multi-question there, Ben, but whatever you can do. And if you need to put all this on a worksheet, it would be great to see it on an Excel spreadsheet for all the federal stimulus dollars and the COVID money, and breakdown of how this spending is going to be done or what's left from that 50 million.
I think it in the spreadsheets that they have submitted. They gave us, as usual, a book of things, which Mr. Barnes probably did deliberately because he knows that we like all this data. But that was great. So
We actually felt that not reading our testimony or not delivering testimony freed us up to provide you with more detailed information in our written testimony. I hope that
I
was.
so appreciate it. So
I hope that's what you wanted.
Yes.
No, I'd be happy to talk about. I can give you a high level response, and then there is more information there, and I'm happy to fill in any gaps.
Okay.
First of all, I will tell you that the federal funds, the rules surrounding the federal money have been a little difficult to nail down sometimes. The new Biden administration just last week finally put out a short letter answering a few of the questions that have been raised about what we were thinking of the HERF2 money, the money that was approved in December 27th, 2020. And so we've learned a little bit more, but they keep telling us additional guidance is coming out. So some of the restrictions we don't know yet, and some of the funding we haven't completely determined how we're going to use it because we're awaiting more clarity from the federal government. One thing that I can answer is that both the CARES Act money from 2020 and the new second round of CARES 2 or CRISA, or however you want to call it, the CRISA money has a very clear requirement that that money that's used for student financial assistance be needs directed. It must provide. It must prioritize. I think the language is to prioritize assistance to students with extraordinary needs. The way that the Pact program is currently structured, we do not believe that it meets the federal requirements for funding. So we do not believe that we can currently, as the Pact program is currently structured, use those funds, use funds for that. So that is, I think, a pretty clear requirement that we would need to have a needs-based, something that reflected extraordinary need. The current program does not do that. It is open regardless of income. And in fact, because it's a last dollar program, it provides higher grant amounts to those with more family resources. And so we think it would not qualify for use of these funds. However, we are absolutely trying to use the significant federal funding we have to shore up our finances, to replace lost revenue, to meet unexpected expenses related to COVID, and to help our students. So we sent out last year approximately $27 million in direct grants to students well, mostly in the spring, although there were some supplemental rounds late in the year, and we've given all that money out. We are now in the planning far into the planning process to do another round of that using the HERF2 money. So we are intending to send out another $27 million or so. We're still working out the details to our students, both at the universities and the colleges. Those will be needs directed. The general approach is to send something to everybody, but those students with high levels of need, as reflected in their FAFSA, will receive larger amounts. And so the amounts will depend on exactly which school you go to, because each institution received its own allocation and has minimum requirements for student financial assistance. So that's been a big piece. Overall, of the total of 50, 80, it's about $110 million between the two rounds of between the CARES Act and CRISA at both the universities and the colleges. But of that, we are already on course to have expended about 60 million of that at a minimum on direct grants to students, so more than half. And then we are also looking to allocate additional funds for lost revenue. At the universities, the minimum grants to students, the minimum requirement for student financial assistance plus revenue replacement will fully utilize all of their funds. And it's not clear that will bring us close to balanced operations for the current year, but we may remain with some level, a small deficit for the current year, even after applying all those funds. We lost quite a lot of revenue in universities. At the colleges, we lost revenue, but it is not as significant because we didn't have the housing costs variation, which drove revenues down in the universities. So we anticipate being able to provide the student assistance, make up for some revenue losses, but also have some funding available for some additional IT improvements that we think are helpful and will allow us to meet student needs in the future more effectively as well as now, as well as to have some additional funds available for further student aid and revenue replacement in the fall if necessary. So we have a tentative plan for providing all that using up all the federal assistance in the colleges over the next year. And we can provide that. We're finalizing it now, but I expect within a week or so, we'll have a updated plan and we can provide that to the committee. Okay. I just want to say one thing though, that in addition to all the CARES Act and CRISA money that has come directly to higher education, we've received a significant amount of funding from the state through the Coronavirus Relief Fund and the Governor's Education Emergency Relief Fund. That was mostly the second category, the gear, went mostly to K-12, but they did provide us with some of that for purchasing laptops and hotspots for community college students. That was very welcome. They've also funded about $30 or $35 million worth of expenses that we assumed, mostly at the universities in order to deal with the pandemic. So costs around reconfiguring classrooms, around implementing new cleaning standards, hiring outside companies to help us with the short notice moving of students off campus and all the other things that we've had to do. In addition, the state has paid for our testing. And the testing, at least as it is today, is exhaustive. We're testing all of our students, I believe, every week, in some cases more often. And so that is a very significant expense. And the state has not only helped us with arranging to have reliable contracts in place to undertake that, but they have funded those contracts. And finally, I would point out that the OPM has reached out to us in recent days and indicated that they believe there are some additional coronavirus relief funds that may be available to us for the spring. And we're in discussions with them about which expenses we have that we can offset with that additional coronavirus relief fund. So we've been, we have needs and we are struggling financially, but we are, those struggles would be much, much worse if it weren't for the federal assistance that we received and frankly, the willingness of the governor's office and OPM to help us meet the very strict public health requirements that have been placed on us.
And wanted to add to that, Paul, is you also asked about that coming tranche of funds from this pending stimulus package. So yes, expect final action on that to happen within, at least the latest I've heard from colleagues in DC, is 10 to 12 days. I think they're saying like St. Patrick's Day, they're expecting something to be in place by. The pot that's in there for K-12 and higher ed is just over $170 billion. However, of that pot, there's only, I think the latest number I saw was 46 billion that was targeted towards higher education reopening. For a lot of that, it looks like, again, we have to wait to see what the final action is out of the Senate and any reconciliation, but it looks like there'll be some additional flexibility in the use of funds, but there still is a significant amount of that that's going to be up to DOE discretion for how we can use those funds. So even after that passes, it still may be a few weeks until we get some final guidance from the federal government on how we can spend the federal assistance that will be coming in that next package. So there'll be more to come on that, but I didn't want to leave that one piece unanswered.
That's perfect. That was going to be my follow-up is, can you give us an update on the upcoming and can it be used for, funding, our debt-free college program for more students. So I appreciate it. Thank you, Madam Chair. Look forward to the working group. Thank you.
Ma'am, thank you. Representative Haddad.
Thank you. I have two questions. The first just relates to something, and I thank Representative Hall for asking her questions because that knocks half a dozen of my questions off of my list as well. So I'm left with a couple more. One is I just wanted to, because this is our 20,000 foot look at the system, wanted to ask you to expound a little bit more on revenue impacts of COVID. You've referenced them several times. As I look at our state budget, I don't think that there are agencies in our state government that have been more adversely impacted by COVID than higher education institutions. Because so much of what you rely on for your revenue sources is student-generated funds, and by and large, students have decided to forego, take a gap year, something else, rather than attend institutions. And so, what have your enrollment drops really looked like at the community colleges? What kind of numbers are we talking about in terms of revenue losses? And what are the impacts at the state universities, where it's not just perhaps an enrollment impact, but also an impact in the provision of services, room and board in particular?
Thank you, Representative Haddad, for that question. What we can say is that we've had just devastating impact on enrollment the pandemic has had. For example, and just a conversation with the Asnantuck people, 27% decline in their student enrollment. So we've seen approximately, on the average, 16% or higher decline in enrollment in our community colleges, and in more detail. So we are experiencing very, very severe challenges to ensure that we provide a pathway to our students to continue for those who dropped out. And we know who they are. Those are those individuals who are on the front line, who are themselves single parents, who are the ones who are out there working to provide just an average wage for their families. So to be more detailed, other than just to saying it's been rather disastrous, I can ask with respect to the financial impact, CFO Carrie Kelly to speak to that, and can say also, Alice, Dr. Pritchard may also want to speak to COVID, particularly and the impact that it's had on our universities with respect to the decline in the residential halls. So at this point, I'll ask those two individuals to provide additional comments, detail.
Thank you, President Gates. I'm Carrie Kelly. I'm the interim CFO for the Connecticut State Community Colleges. And I'm happy to talk a little bit more about how enrollments have negatively impacted revenues in the current year. The original adopted budget for the community colleges was $505 million. In October, in recognition of the declining enrollment, the board revised the budget downward to $483 million. And now that we're at the mid-year with the preliminary spring enrollment numbers, the mid-year is predicted to be $470 million. That's a 7% drop. This is primarily related to tuition and fees, but we've also seen declines in other sources of revenue, such as room rental and bookstore fees. So that is really where we stand on the community college side.
Good morning, Alice Pritchard here, Chief of Staff. I think actually, Ben, it would help to do the context of the university financial loss first, and then we can talk about how they've tried to manage that.
Mr. Barnes?
Don't forget to unmute, Ben, before you start your...
Sorry, I was sparing you me rifling through my papers to get the right packet of university financial information. So the universities have been very hard hit. The housing number, which is I think the hardest hit, we are currently projecting that the housing revenue is going to be $41 million for the entire system this year. The fiscal 20 actual was $52 million, but this number in recent experience, like in fiscal 17, 18, 19, was in the range of about 75 million. So we are down nearly that. The housing revenue has been cut almost in half compared to its historic levels. So the FY20 number reflects the fact that we had to refund make large refunds of about $20 million to all of our students. If that had not happened and we'd not had the pandemic, we would have anticipated revenue closer to the 70 million normal level in housing. Food, again, that's way down. Normally, I think last year we had in fiscal 20, we had $26 million in food revenue. Now we're down to about $18 million in food revenue. Unfortunately, because of the complexity of offering food service during a pandemic, our costs have actually not gone down much. I mean, we saved a little bit in buying less food itself, but the costs of operating food service in the pandemic are, there's more staffing involved and it's more challenging. In the areas of tuition and fees, we are down. We're down about 6% in enrollment at the universities, and that is reflected in our tuition and fee numbers compared to the prior year. So we're right now, compared to our revised budget, which again also was adopted in October. So compared to where we thought we were going to be just last fall, which was already a pretty low number, we ended up dropping an additional $6 million because of continued enrollment declines coming into the spring semester. I think reflecting, I assume, fatigue with pandemic operations amongst our students. So students who elected to reduce the number of courses they took or maybe take the semester off. So that we have deep revenue holes. Overall, we're expecting $703 million in revenue at the universities. We have, in 2019, I believe our revenue is about $750 million. So we're down overall about $50 million in revenue compared to our last, year that was not impacted by the pandemic.
If I could just add, thank you, Representative Haddad, for the question. I think we worked really hard at the universities to make our campuses very safe this fall and spring, and they had very low numbers of positive cases, which was great. But I think we did lose a number of students on the spring return. I think because, as Ben said, it was not the campus experience that they were looking for, and so we're hoping to bring those students back. Certainly in the fall, but we did experience some very, COVID-related losses, I think, in the spring semester of students who gave it their all the first semester, but just really didn't think that being on ground was worth the money or time.
Thank you. I have one just follow-up question to that. This will be my final question. In this committee, we often talk dollars and cents, tonight, I think we'll hear more of the human impact, but I did just want to ask President Gates and anyone else who'd like to respond. As we talk about enrollment declines, what we're really talking about is that COVID has negatively impacted students in Connecticut from being able to obtain a post-secondary education for whatever reason. It could be economic impacts of COVID with their folks, parents or family being out of work. It could be a choice because the college experience is so different now than what they had looked forward to or hoped for. I actually run a small program in the Hartford area where we help students matriculate into college from Hartford Public Schools. And we saw among our program participants, where usually we get about 75 to 80% of them will matriculate. Last fall, that number dropped to just 50%. And in this instance, we're talking about predominantly low-income, first-generation minority students. And so there's an equity issue as well because we know that the groups that are most adversely impacted by the coronavirus are those folks. I mean, low-income and minority students. So my question, I guess, is this, which is, how do we get back to normal? And what can you do to go after the group of students that has just foregone a year? We often talk about summer melt, the difference between the intention from when they graduate high school and get into college. Now we're looking at COVID mill, which is of a completely different order, and I think potentially has a disastrous impact on certainly those students, but also a measurable negative impact on the economy in Connecticut, because we have this interruption in the flow of workforce development that we often don't talk about. So I'd like to ask you to answer this question about what can we do, and do you have a budget that's adequate to address this issue, about new initiatives to go back and find the folks who are taking these gap years, make sure that they get enrolled and can complete, and that there is no equity issue or equity impact in the COVID pandemic in terms of access to post-secondary education. That's a big question, I understand, but budgets are about values and people, and I want to know what we can do to mitigate the impact, not just on your budget, but on the people you serve.
Thank you, Representative Haddad. That's a very, very critical question, and one we have prioritized in the CSCU system, and that's really looking at equity and how we address equity directly. There are a couple of initiatives that are ongoing, one of which, of course, is very much aligned to Ben Barnes' response, and that's how we give these dollars, distribute these dollars to our students. One of the things I've asked all of the staff to do, executive staff, is look at which students are in the greatest needs. First of all, those who aren't already in attendance or matriculants of our institution, and to ensure that we proportionately provide dollars to support those individuals, because equity does require that we provide, in certain cases, there different amounts of support to ensure that our students are all equally given the opportunity to attain a credential. The other thing I've suggested, and I think and that is marketing. We have to make sure that we are very much connected to our community-based organizations, to those communities where our students have not decided to return to our institutions. So we're looking at two segments: those students who will matriculate, who are experiencing very dire hardship finances, and those students who have yet undecided. They haven't decided that they're going to come back. So that means our communication has to be improved tremendously. The other thing that we're doing is we're putting in place for those students who are returning, what we're speaking of guided pathways, onboarding, ensuring that we deal with those students very early on and that we stay with them from the beginning, the entry of their institutions to the completion, whether it is a credential or a diploma. I think it's just very critical too that the culture of our institutions, all of them, are ones that welcome these individuals from diverse groups in our society. That's really huge. We focus a lot on the just the cognitive type variables and factors, but we don't tend to focus, Representative Haddad, as much on the effective ones. When a student enters, what does it take? One course where we misplace, the student is displaced, for example, in an entry course. And one of the big ones we're working on that you may have heard about is the alignment of the completion of math and English. That's to make sure that these students who are underserved enter our institutions and are placed in the right gateway courses. Math and English are huge detriment and roadblocks to our students, specifically because they're not always aligned to their area of study. So we have a lot of initiatives there. We do need dollars to ensure that we are able to implement these initiatives in the CSCU system. And with the trying to balance the deficit this year and the new initiatives, we are still very much focused on ensuring that we respond to these underrepresented populations. The DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusiveness are all very critical. So I hope that answers in part is the high level view. of what we're doing, we're very much mindful of the need to ensure underrepresented groups are served. And it's so on that note, I can add, let's see who else can add to that. Those who are working in the community college, that's going to be maybe Dr. Buckley, who can speak to that and the other activities. I think she has great examples of what we're doing as well.
Well, thank you. Thank you, President Gates. Representative Haddad, we have seen, even in the fall, we were very concerned about the disproportionate drop in enrollment for our most underserved student populations. It was significantly larger among Black and African-American students and Latinx students and students who are already on Pell. So our students who face significant barriers to pursuing higher education and the ones who would benefit the most have been disproportionately impacted by COVID. It is not just in Connecticut, we see it nationwide, and we're working very hard to focus on those students and to bring them back. And if I could just expand a little bit on something that Dr. Gates said, we have started rolling out the guided pathways advising model for the community college students. Currently, the advisor caseload, we have 750 students for every academic advisor in the community college, which is far below benchmarks. And the Board of Regents has charged us to move that metric so that every advisor has a caseload of 250 students. And that is the holistic case management advising model that they charge us to implement last year. We are in the process right now of rolling that out in a phased approach. The first 3 colleges that are coming on board are Housatonic, Middlesex, and Northwestern Connecticut Community College. And we are searching, we've hired 3 regional advising directors to support this work. We are currently searching for an additional 30 advisors and 3 campus advising leads. And these are the people so that every one of our students has a person who will be there and advocate for them and help to remove those barriers and connect them with the resources, both within the college and in the community, that can support that success. So we are very excited to be bringing this initiative online.
Thank you.
So, yes,
Go ahead.
To the cost, is there someone else who wants to provide additional details? Is that CFO Barnes?
I'm happy to take that one, President Gates.
Thank you. Thank you, CFO Kelly.
Thanks. So as part of our budget request to the Office of Policy and Management, we sought a current services adjustment to implement the next phase of guided pathways. And that would be $2.8 million to bring on 46 additional advisors and campus advising leads at 4 campuses.
And I would be remiss if I didn't take the opportunity, Representative Haddad, you asked us what we can do for our students. And one thing I think legislators can do in addition to those expansion options is preserve or expand block grant funding for our institutions. Those are our most flexible source of funding. And those are things that are really critical for us if we're looking to quickly roll out additional or supplemental mental health supports, advisors, career counselors, tutoring or mentoring programs. That's a critical source of those funds that we can use to rapidly adapt to the needs that we see that our students have. So I know it may sound oddly self-serving being in front of appropriations and asking you to preserve our block grant funding, but that is really the most effective source that we have for addressing the immediate needs of our students in a way that is nimble and reactive and responsive to what we are seeing actually happening on the ground.
I appreciate your responses, and I'm particularly interested in hearing more about your proposal for additional college advisors. If you could provide that to me, that would be helpful, because I think we in the General Assembly have been very concerned about the ratio of counselors to students as well. I think that I don't know that we can help, but I certainly want the information. And then lastly, I'll just say, I appreciate it. It's easy for us to look at a budget and see that the federal government is about to, fill a hole without and be satisfied with that, without really recognizing that the hole exists because students are going underserved. And I just wanted to make sure that we that we recognize that, and we can't let those students go underserved into the future. We have to figure out a way to make sure that post-secondary education opportunities are available to everybody, and that after the pandemic subsides, that those folks feel welcome and are able to get back into the system, because it's important for our economy and important for their futures. Thank you.
Thank you. And Shauna, I heard you on the preserve the block grants. In light of your deficits and everything, expand on that to us later in the subcommittee, because obviously that's critical, but right now we have to plug up the holes that you have. So the idea of plugging up at least the 50 million that Mr. Barnes addressed, that's got to be addressed very quickly, and then we can look at the block grants from there. So it's a hierarchy, and we got to make sure that you remain whole, and then make those preservations. And Representative Haddad is absolutely correct. The counselors are critical, and 250 is too much. Representative Turco, I think, is next. Yes, Representative Turco.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To President Gates and your team, I wanted to follow up on a couple questions to the Pact program that Senator Austin started on. The $6 million additional dollars in the proposed budget, that covers, if my understanding is correct, for around 3,100 students after we receive any federal and other state grants. That covers the rest of their tuition for enrollment. Is that correct? And did I hear that there is an additional 1,000 students to bring it up to about 4,000 students that would be eligible if it was that 6 million was increased by a little bit more? Is that true?
That is correct, but the one who's the lead here on the Pact program for us is Dr. Buckley, and then I think CFO Kelly can speak to that too.
Thank you, Dr. Gates. So the Pact program is a last dollar scholarship. So for students who are eligible as first-time college students when they enrolled in 2019, any federal or state grant that they qualified for was applied. And then the Pact covered the difference in the tuition and fees. So students who met the other eligibility requirements, but were not, for example, eligible for federal grant aid, the Pact would cover more than a student who was a Pell Grant recipient. There is a minimum grant of $250 for students who are fully funded through grant aid. So we did have this fall about 3,000 students who received Pact funding, and then there were about 1,200, 1,300 more who were eligible but registered after we had run out of funding for the fall term. So the $6 million really sees this initial cohort of about 3,000 students through their second year. It doesn't really allow us to open the program up and grow it for those students who are graduating high school in the fall of 20 and enrolling in this coming 21. Sorry, I've lost track of years. And enrolling this fall. So it really sees us through this first cohort without allowing us the ability to grow the cohort year after year. And it is oversubscribed at the moment. And I will turn it over to our interim CFO, Kelly.
So because of the pandemic in the last legislative session, no funding was identified to support the debt-free college program known as Pact. And so in June, the board decided to use $3 million for the fall semester to support Pact from the system reserves. And when it came to make a decision about whether to sustain this program for the spring semester, because of the bipartisan support expressed in a letter to the Board of Regents indicating ongoing commitment to this initiative, the board decided to sustain Pact with an additional $3 million. So in the current fiscal year, the board has committed $6 million out of reserves. So we're very excited to see that in the governor's recommended budget, funding is recommended at the level of $6 million in the upcoming biennium. But that still presents us with the challenge of the current year $6 million, which could be given to us as a deficiency appropriation or some additional source of funding to make us whole for the costs we've incurred for the current year students. The challenge, as Dr. Buckley mentioned, is that the $6 million level identified in the governor's recommended for both 22 and 23 doesn't allow us to enroll new students. It's really sustaining the existing cohort of students. So as part of our governor's recommended budget request to OPM, we had asked for funding in FY 22 and 23 based on the original estimate done by OPM in the iLottery report, comparing the iLottery revenues and debt-free college. And at that time, based on the best numbers available, we believed that the 22 fully operational program would be about 16.8 million. And in 23, it would be about 22 million. Those were based on 2019 eligibility figures. And we have a lot better data now that we're through the fall semester and we're past the enrollments in the spring. So we're pulling that data together, and we expect that by the end of March, we'll have a more refined estimate. But just to give you an order of magnitude, to fully fund the program, it would be far more than the $6 million. We really do hope to tap into those underserved students because we know there is demand there with the 1,000 students who are eligible but underserved this year by Pact.
Thank you. And for my second question, do you have any data yet or a sense, and I know it's only been a year now of the program, but how successful has the Pact program been with your and I know you've done some marketing efforts in enticing more students to go full-time instead of part-time to take advantage of this debt-free community college program? And how successful has it been in bringing in additional federal dollars to the state to help cover the cost than we previously would have received, maybe because these students would have been part-time instead? Or just we have some eligibility for some extra federal money now with additional students in the program. And if these are too big of questions to answer on the spot, then maybe you can provide information later. And thank you so much for everything you're doing to help implement this program.
I can take a quick stab at that answer, Representative Turco. First of all, full-time student, this is such a screwy year in enrollment that I'm reluctant to draw any firm conclusions, but these are the tentative conclusions I would draw, is that if you look at our spring enrollment compared to the prior spring, you can sort of see which groups did better or worse than average. The average is about 17% drop, but full-time actually dropped slightly less than that. So full-time students held up their, didn't lose ground as much as part-time students. We had greater losses in enrollment by part-time students than full-time students. And in fact, this spring we have just under 10,000 full-time students in the community colleges. And we have, as Dr. Buckley said, 3,100 students in the Pact program. Another, I think it's 1,400 who are still eligible for Pact, meaning they're taking a full-time load, and we've encouraged them to continue to do that and preserve their eligibility in case funding comes up. But that means that nearly half of the full-time students that we currently enroll at the community colleges are on the Pact program. Would they have enrolled full-time without Pact? I'm sure some of them would. But I see this as an indication that the Pact program was helpful in shoring up one area of our enrollment to some degree, and that without the Pact program, we would have seen even deeper losses, particularly among these full-time students. Now, obviously, I wish we'd had another program in place that would have held, supported some of the other groups of students that we lost more of in enrollment. But that doesn't take away from the appreciation that we all feel for the impact on enrollment that we believe Pact had, which was to hold up our full-time student numbers better than average.
Can I just ask Ben for a follow-up? Do we have a sense of the Pell money that was brought in as well? Maybe that we bring that in subcommittee, but that was a part of Representative Turco's question as well.
Yes, we can certainly do that. I mean, we have of the, and I don't have the full details on the fall, on what happened in the fall, but in the, in the spring, but in the fall, approximately half of the students who received Pell Awards were either fully Pell eligible or partially Pell eligible. So we clearly are bringing in a significant number of Pell eligible full-time students into the program. The benefit for them is less because they're only getting the $250 minimum payment in many cases, although the partial Pell students may get somewhat more. We clearly are attracting both non-Pell and Pell students to this program.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Madam Chair, for allowing me these questions.
Thank you. And last, Representative Datham.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you for your presentation. Dr. Gates, nice to see you again. Just wanted to follow up, and apologies if this has been asked. I'm doing 2 Zooms at the same time. The agency requested of the governor a $20 million increase over 21 for the community tech college system, and a $43 million increase in fiscal year 23 against fiscal year 21. Why was there such a large ask? And is there things that are going to be not being able to be funded as a result? Is my first question, and let me know if that has been answered. And then my second question really has to do about the reserves. We've had a total decrease in reserves of $66 million for 2020 to 2021. How are we going to be managing that going forward? And it's just a little bit concerning because my understanding is we were going to see some cost savings with the community college consolidation, and it seems like costs are going up rather than going down. And then if I can sneak in a third to bring to the work group, really get a follow on from Rep Haddad's conversation about, why people finish, if we can get an understanding. And Jane, or Dr. Gates, I talked about it last week in our meeting, but really just wanted to get a better sort of complete answer on what are we doing to keep the students in school, and if they are leaving for jobs? Are they going to 4-year universities? And I'd love to know that by gender as well as by race, to see if we are missing a trick when we're in the programs. So if you can bring all 3 of those to the work group, I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative, and thank you for your questions. And I want to thank Dr. Gates for you and your team for all. Could you also bring details on the guided pathways? I heard Housatonic, Middlesex, and what was the third college?
Northwestern.
I'm sorry?
Northwestern Community College.
Northwestern, okay. And could you bring to the work group how you're going to roll it out with the rest of the community colleges? I'd like to know, because there are some more that are much larger, and I'm concerned about that, and I'm sure you know which one I'm concerned about, so I don't need to go any deeper into that one. So thank you all, and have a great day. And right now we will recess until 1 o'clock, when we will have University of Connecticut and UConn Health Center. Thank you,
Representative Walker.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you. Thank you.
See everyone at 1.